Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving most. Sometimes a stranger becomes family when blood relations have long since faded away. On the frozen edge of a Viking settlement, an aging warrior named Bram lives alone, with nothing but memories and regret. His home once rang with laughter, now it holds only silence. On the coldest winter night, he finds a small girl buried in the snow, barely alive, with no one to claim her. He brings her inside to warm her by the fire, expecting someone to come for her. But no one does. As the days pass and the ice begins to melt, something changes between them. Could saving this lost child be the key to healing his own broken heart? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The settlement of Ravnsfjord clung to the edge of the world, like a barnacle to a ship's hull. It was not a grand place, not like the coastal towns where jarls held court and trade ships came laden with goods from distant lands. Ravnsfjord was simpler than that, humbler. A collection of long houses and smaller dwellings scattered along the tree line where the great northern forest met the open snowfields. Smoke rose from roof holes in thin grey columns, and the smell of burning pine and cooking meat drifted on the wind. In summer, the place had a certain rough beauty. Wildflowers dotting the meadows, children running barefoot, the sound of hammers on anvils and women singing as they worked their looms. But winter changed everything. Winter made Ravnsfjord feel like the end of all things. Bram had lived in Ravnsfjord for more than 40 years. He had been born in a house not far from where he lived now, delivered by the same healer woman who would later deliver his own daughter. He had grown from boy to man here, learned to fight here, taken a wife here, buried that wife here. His life had unfolded in this place like a scroll, slowly unrolling, revealing joy and sorrow in equal measure. Once he had been proud to call himself a man of Ravnsfjord. Once his name had meant something. Bram the Steady, they had called him in his younger days. Not because he was the strongest or the fastest, but because he never faltered. In battle, when other men panicked or fled, Bram held his ground. When the settlement faced lean winters or sickness, Bram worked without complaint. He had fought in 3 major campaigns, sailed with raiding parties down the coast, stood shoulder to shoulder with men who became legends. He had killed when necessary, shown mercy when possible, and always returned home. His reputation had been solid as oak, reliable as the sunrise. People trusted Bram. They relied on him. That was a long time ago. Now, as he approached his 50th winter, Bram was known by a different name, though no one said it to his face. Bram the Broken, Bram the Hollow, the man who survived when his family did not. He saw it in their eyes when he walked through the settlement. The pity, the awkward glances, the way conversations stopped when he approached. They meant well, most of them. They had brought food after his wife died, offered help he refused, spoken words of comfort that landed like stones in still water. But pity was a weight all its own, and Bram had grown tired of carrying it. His home sat at the far edge of the settlement, closest to the forest. It was a modest structure, well built but weathered. Smoke stains darkened the wood around the roof hole. The door hung slightly crooked. He kept meaning to fix it, but never found the will. Inside, the main room served as kitchen, workshop, and living space. A central fire pit provided heat and light. Sleeping quarters lay beyond a partition of stretched hide. Furs and blankets were piled in one corner. Tools hung from pegs on the walls. Axes, knives, woodworking implements he rarely touched anymore. A loom sat silent and dusty in another corner, a relic of his wife's presence. The carved wooden horse sat in a chest near his sleeping area. He had made it 12 years ago for his daughter, Astrid, not the healer woman, but his own little girl, who had borne the same name. She had been 4 years old then, bright-eyed and curious, with her mother's smile and his stubborn chin. The horse had been painted once, red and yellow, though the colors had faded. He had spent weeks carving it, getting every detail right, the flowing mane, the powerful legs, the proud arch of the neck. Astrid had loved it, carried it everywhere, talked to it like it could understand. She had named it Sunwind. Astrid had died at 6 years old. A fever had swept through the settlement that autumn, claiming mostly the very young and very old. His daughter had fought for 5 days, her small body burning with heat, while he and his wife Hilda took turns cooling her with wet cloths and praying to any god who might listen. None had. On the morning of the 6th day, she simply stopped breathing. One moment she was there, struggling, and the next she was gone. Just like that, as if life were nothing more than a candle flame that could be snuffed out by the slightest breeze. Hilda had never recovered from losing Astrid. Oh, she had continued living, going through the motions, cooking, cleaning, speaking when spoken to. But the light had gone out of her. She became a ghost in her own home, hollow and distant. Bram had tried to reach her, tried to pull her back to the world of the living, but grief had built a wall around her heart that he could not breach. 2 years after Astrid's death, Hilda had simply stopped eating. Refused food, refused water, refused to fight anymore. She wasted away over the course of a month, and Bram could only watch helpless as he lost her too. Her last words to him had been, "I'm going to be with our girl now." Then she closed her eyes and never opened them again. That had been 3 years ago. 3 long years of existing rather than living. 3 years of waking each morning and finding no reason to rise except that his body stubbornly continued functioning. 3 years of empty rooms and silent meals, and nights spent staring at the fire until exhaustion finally dragged him into dreamless sleep. The settlement had rallied around him at first. Halvard, the village elder, had visited often, bringing news and attempting conversation. Astrid the healer, named for his daughter by pure coincidence, had checked on him, brought herbs for sleep and appetite, offered wisdom about grief that he could not absorb. His nephew Eric, his sister's boy who lived 3 houses down, still came by regularly with food or firewood or simply company. Eric was a good young man, barely 20, with a kind heart and his mother's gentle persistence. He never pushed, never demanded, just showed up and sat with Bram in comfortable silence or talked about simple things, the weather, the hunting, village gossip. But even Eric's visits had grown less frequent, not because he cared less, but because Bram had become difficult to be around. He drank too much. He snapped at kindness. He radiated a bitterness that pushed people away like heat from a forge. He knew he was doing it, knew he was becoming the kind of man he once would have pitied or avoided. But knowing and changing were 2 different things, and change required energy he did not possess. His days followed a pattern that varied little. He woke before dawn, built up the fire, ate whatever was easiest, usually dried meat and stale bread. He avoided the communal areas of the settlement, took his axe into the forest, and cut wood. Not because he needed that much wood, but because the work was simple and exhausting and required no thought. Swing the axe, split the log, stack the pieces. Repeat until his shoulders ached and his hands blistered. Then home again as the light faded. More food, usually cold. Drink until the edges of his grief softened. Sleep until the nightmares woke him, then lie awake until dawn brought the mercy of routine again. The nightmares were always the same. Sometimes he stood at Astrid's bedside, watching her slip away, while he remained frozen, unable to help. Sometimes he held Hilda as she wasted to nothing in his arms, her bones sharp as bird wings. Sometimes he was on a battlefield, surrounded by the dead, searching desperately for his family among the corpses and finding them, always finding them. He would wake gasping, sweat-soaked despite the cold, his heart hammering against his ribs like something trying to escape. On better days, rare as summer snow, he would allow himself to remember the good times. Hilda's laugh, which had been surprisingly loud and unrestrained for such a small woman. The way she had sung while working, old songs her mother taught her. Astrid's endless questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds go in winter? How did you get that scar on your arm? The warmth of his wife's body pressed against his back on cold nights. His daughter's small hand in his as they walked to the stream to check fishing lines. These memories hurt, but they hurt in a different way, like pressing on a bruise to remember it was there. The other villagers had mostly given up trying to draw him back into the fold. He appeared at the necessary gatherings, harvest celebrations, winter solstice observances, funerals. He contributed his share to communal stores. He attended the thing when disputes needed settling, though he rarely spoke. He was a citizen in name, present in body, but absent in spirit. A living ghost among the living. Halvard still tried, bless him. The old man was nearly 70, his beard more white than grey, his face a map of wrinkles earned through decades of laughter and worry. He had led Ravnsfjord for 30 years, seen it through hard times and good. He had buried 3 wives and more friends than he could count, yet somehow maintained a fundamental optimism about life that Bram found both admirable and incomprehensible. "You're still young enough to start again," Halvard had told him once, maybe a year past. They had been standing near the communal fire pit, watching the children play. You could take another wife, have more children, build a new life. The suggestion had filled Bram with such rage that he had walked away without a word, afraid of what he might say if he opened his mouth. Start again, as if Hilda and Astrid were broken tools that could simply be replaced, as if love were interchangeable, as if one family could substitute for another like one axe for another when the first grew dull. The old man meant well, but he understood nothing. Yet here Bram remained in this place that held every memory of what he had lost. He could have left. He could have taken ship to another settlement, started fresh somewhere new where no one knew him or his story. But leaving felt like a betrayal, like abandoning the only place where his wife and daughter had truly existed. Here he could walk paths they had walked. Here the world still held traces of them, faint as morning mist but real. To leave would be to consign them fully to the past, to admit they were truly gone. So he stayed, trapped by grief and memory, going through the motions of a life that felt increasingly meaningless. The worn leather belt that hung by his hearth had once held his sword and knife. He had worn it in every battle, every raid. The leather was scarred and stained, the metal fittings tarnished. It had been part of him once, as familiar as his own skin. Now it hung there unused, gathering dust, a relic of a man he used to be. Sometimes he looked at it and felt a distant ache, like the ghost of an amputated limb. That warrior seemed like a stranger now, someone he had heard stories about but never actually met. Winter had come early this year, and hard. The first snows fell before the harvest was fully in, and the cold settled over the land like a predator claiming its territory. Game grew scarce. Wolves came closer to the settlement, bold with hunger. The old folk began to talk about signs and omens, the way they always did when winter bit particularly hard. They spoke of the gods' displeasure, of sacrifices that should be made, of ancient patterns repeating. Bram paid little attention to such talk. The gods, if they existed, had made their position on him quite clear. It was on one of these bitter nights, when the wind howled like a living thing, and snow fell so thick you could barely see your hand before your face, that everything changed. Bram had no way of knowing it then, of course. He was sitting by his fire, a cup of mead going warm in his hands, listening to the storm rage outside and thinking about nothing in particular. The kind of empty evening he had grown accustomed to. The kind of night that bled into all the other nights until they formed one continuous stretch of forgettable time. He had no idea that before morning came, his life would be completely different. That the man who sat by that fire, empty and broken, would be gone forever. That something he had thought long dead would stir back to life. All he knew was that the wind was loud and the fire was warm, and the mead was making his head pleasantly fuzzy. Outside, in the killing cold and howling dark, a small life was flickering, about to go out, and for reasons he would never fully understand, he would be the one to save it. The sound came during the darkest part of the night, when even the wind seemed to pause for breath. Bram had been half asleep in his chair, the fire burned down to coals. His third cup of mead tipped precariously in his loose grip. The storm had been raging for hours, the kind of blizzard that made you grateful for walls and a roof. At first, he thought he imagined it. A thin sound, barely audible beneath the wind's howl. Something between a cry and a whimper, so faint it might have been a trick of the storm. He lifted his head, listening. Nothing, just wind and the soft hiss of snow against wood. He settled back, convincing himself it was nothing. Then it came again. Clearer this time, unmistakable. A child's voice. Bram sat up straight, his heart suddenly hammering. He moved to the door and pressed his ear against the wood. The storm was too loud, drowning out everything else. But he had heard something. He was certain of it. He should ignore it. Going out in this weather was dangerous, possibly fatal. The temperature had dropped so low that exposed skin would freeze in minutes. The snow was already knee-deep and still falling. Anyone fool enough to venture out now risked getting lost 10 paces from their own door. But the sound came again, and this time Bram heard it clearly. Not an animal, a child, crying out in the dark. His hand was on the door latch before he made a conscious decision. He grabbed his heaviest cloak, wrapped it around his shoulders, pulled on his boots. He took a lamp from the table and lifted the latch. The wind hit him like a fist. It tore the door from his hand and slammed it against the wall, driving snow into his face with stinging force. The cold was immediate and absolute, stealing his breath. He could see nothing beyond a wall of white chaos. For a moment he reconsidered. This was madness, but then the cry came again, closer now, off to his left. Weak and desperate, Bram stepped out into the storm. The snow came up past his knees. Each step required effort, and the wind fought him like an adversary. He held the lamp high, but its light revealed nothing except endless snow falling in sheets. He called out, his voice immediately swallowed by the wind. "Where are you? Call out if you can hear me." For a long moment, nothing. Then faint as a whisper, the sound again. Ahead of him now, maybe 20 paces. He pushed forward, counting his steps, trying to maintain his bearings. 10 steps, 15, 20, his face was already numb. The lamp guttered and died, blown out by the wind. He dropped it and kept moving, one hand stretched before him. "Where are you, child? Make a sound." A weak cry answered him, so close it startled him. He dropped to his knees and began sweeping his arms through the snow, pushing it aside, searching. His hands met something soft, fabric. He dug faster, his heart racing, and his fingers found an arm, small and cold. He began digging frantically, scooping away the snow that had nearly buried the child completely. She was tiny, perhaps 6 or 7 years old. Her face was pale as death, her lips blue. She wore strange clothing, a dress too thin for this weather, and over it a tattered cloak of deep blue that seemed foreign. Her feet were bare, the skin white and waxy. She was not moving. For a terrible moment, Bram thought she was already dead. Then her chest rose ever so slightly and fell again. She was alive, barely. He gathered her into his arms, shocked by how light she was. He pressed her against his chest, trying to share what warmth his body could offer, and turned back, or what he thought was the way back. In the storm, with no landmarks visible, he could not be sure. Panic touched him. If he went the wrong direction, they would both die. He forced himself to think. The wind had been at his back when he left. If he kept it in his face now, he should find his way home. He began walking, counting steps. The child held tight against him. Her skin was so cold it frightened him. 50 steps, 70, 100. Nothing but snow and wind, and the growing certainty that he had gone wrong. His legs were burning with effort. His face had gone numb. Then suddenly darkness ahead. Solid darkness, a wall. His house. Relief flooded through him. He staggered along the wall, found the door still hanging open, and lurched through the doorway, kicking it shut behind him. The contrast was shocking. Inside, protected from the wind, the air felt warm despite the dying fire. He carried the girl to his sleeping area and laid her on the pile of furs, then rushed to build up the fire, throwing on wood until flames leaped high. By the firelight, he could see her properly. She was perhaps 7 years old, small for her age. Her hair was dark, matted with snow. Her face was delicate, fine-boned. Her skin was so pale it seemed translucent. The blue cloak she wore was of fine weaving, decorated with patterns he did not recognize. Beneath it, her dress was equally strange, cut in an Eastern style perhaps. Most alarming were her bare feet. The skin was white and hard-looking, clearly frostbitten. Her hands were the same. If she survived, she might lose fingers or toes. Bram stripped off her wet clothing and wrapped her in every fur and blanket he had. He rubbed her arms and legs, trying to restore circulation, careful not to be too rough. She did not respond, did not open her eyes. Her breathing was shallow, irregular. He heated water-soaked cloths and placed them against her chest and stomach, providing warmth directly to her core. He wrapped her feet and hands carefully. He tilted her head back and dribbled warm water between her lips, massaging her throat. Most of it ran out, but some went down. Hours passed. Bram worked steadily, changing the warm cloths, adjusting the furs, monitoring her breathing. The storm continued outside, but inside his small house, time seemed suspended. The world had narrowed to this, a dying child and a broken man trying desperately to keep her alive. Dawn came eventually, grey light seeping through the cracks around the door. The storm had not lessened. Bram sat beside the girl, exhausted, watching her face. She had not woken, but her breathing had steadied. Her skin had lost some of its deathly pallor. Her lips were no longer blue. She was alive. For now, as full daylight arrived, Bram finally allowed himself to really look at her. Who was she? Where had she come from? How had a child ended up alone in a blizzard, barefoot and inadequately dressed? He expected someone at any moment, a frantic parent, a search party. Someone would have noticed a child missing. He would care for her until they came, then return her to her family. A temporary situation, but as the day wore on and no one came, as the storm continued and the girl slept on, something began to shift in Bram's chest. A feeling he had not experienced in 3 years. A sense of purpose, fragile as a soap bubble, but present nonetheless. The girl stirred once, late in the afternoon, her eyelids fluttering. For a moment, Bram thought she would wake, but she only whimpered softly and settled back into unconsciousness. He found himself reaching out to touch her forehead, checking for fever, his hand gentle. The gesture was automatic, remembered from another life when he had done this for his own daughter. For just a moment, the grief that lived in his chest like a stone shifted, making room for something else. Outside, the storm howled on, burying the world in white. Inside, beside a fire that burned warm and steady, a broken man kept watch over a dying child. And neither of them knew yet that they were going to save each other. The girl woke on the second day, and it was the most terrifying thing Bram had witnessed in years. Her eyes snapped open suddenly, wide and wild, and she sat up with a gasp that sounded like drowning. Before Bram could react, she scrambled backward across the furs, pressing herself into the corner where the wall met the sleeping platform, her body rigid with fear. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings, the fire, the strange man sitting near her. When Bram moved, even slightly, she flinched as if struck. "Easy now," Bram said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe here. You were in the snow. I brought you inside. Do you understand me?" The girl said nothing. Her breathing came fast and shallow. She looked like a cornered animal, ready to bolt or fight despite having nowhere to go. Her dark eyes fixed on him with an intensity that was unsettling in one so young. Bram stayed very still. He had seen this kind of fear before. In captives and slaves, in people who had endured things that broke something fundamental inside them. This was not ordinary childhood fear. This was deeper, older somehow. "I won't hurt you," he said, keeping his voice low and calm. "Can you tell me your name? Do you remember what happened?" Still nothing. The girl's eyes moved to the door, calculating distance, then back to him. Her small hands gripped the furs she had pulled around herself like armor. Bram tried a different approach. He reached slowly for the clay bowl beside the fire, a simple vessel chipped on one side from years of use, and ladled warm broth into it. The smell filled the small space, rich and savory. He saw the girl's nostrils flare, her eyes flick to the bowl, then back to his face. "You must be hungry," he said. "This is just broth. Beef and barley. It's warm. It will help." He set the bowl on the floor between them, then deliberately moved back, giving her space. The girl watched him with suspicion, but her eyes kept returning to the bowl. Minutes passed. Bram sat quietly, not moving, barely breathing. Finally, moving like something wild approaching a trap, the girl crept forward. She snatched the bowl with both hands and retreated to her corner, never taking her eyes off him. She drank the broth in desperate gulps, as if she had not eaten in days, which Bram realized might well be true. When the bowl was empty, she set it down carefully and pulled the furs tighter around herself, still watching him. "Better?" Bram asked. The girl said nothing, but something in her posture had relaxed, just slightly. The edge of panic had dulled. She was still frightened, still ready to run, but no longer on the verge of breaking. The rest of that day passed in careful silence. Bram moved slowly, narrating his actions before he made them. "I'm going to add wood to the fire now. I'm going to get more water. I'm going to sit here by the wall." The girl watched everything but did not speak, did not move from her corner, except to use the chamber pot when Bram stepped outside to give her privacy. By evening, she had accepted a second bowl of broth and a piece of bread. She ate more slowly this time, with less desperation. Bram found himself studying her features, trying to place where she might be from. Her bone structure suggested mixed heritage, perhaps Norse and something Eastern. Her hair, now dried, was nearly black and fell in waves past her shoulders. Her face would be pretty when it was not pinched with fear and hunger. That night, as darkness fell, the girl finally slept. But her sleep was troubled. She whimpered and thrashed, crying out in a language Bram did not understand. He wanted to comfort her, but knew his touch would only frighten her more. So he sat near enough to keep watch, far enough to not seem threatening, and listened to her nightmares until they faded into quieter rest. The third day brought Eric. Bram heard his nephew's voice calling from outside, muffled by the walls. "Uncle Bram, are you alive in there? The storm's finally broken." Bram opened the door to find Eric covered in snow, grinning despite the cold. The young man's smile faltered when he saw Bram's expression. "What's wrong?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Come inside," Bram said. Quietly, Eric stepped in, stomping snow from his boots, and froze when he saw the girl in the corner. She had pressed herself back against the wall again, eyes wide, watching this new stranger with renewed fear. "Gods above," Eric breathed. "Who is that?" "I found her in the storm," Bram said quietly. "2 nights ago. She was nearly dead. I don't know who she is. She won't speak." Eric's face softened immediately. He had always had a gentle way about him, a kindness that reminded Bram of his sister. Slowly, carefully, Eric crouched down, so he was at the girl's eye level. He did not approach, did not reach out, just smiled. "Hello there, little one," he said, his voice warm. "My name is Eric. That scary-looking man is my Uncle Bram, but don't worry about him. He's actually very nice, even though he looks like an angry bear. Are you hungry? Would you like something to eat?" The girl's eyes moved between them. For the first time, Bram saw something other than fear in her expression. Uncertainty, perhaps. Calculation. She was trying to decide if these men were threats. Eric glanced at Bram. "Has anyone come looking for her?" "No one. I was going to ask around the settlement today, see if anyone knows her, or if there were travelers caught in the storm." "I'll ask," Eric offered. "You should stay here with her. She seems less frightened with you than she was when I came in." "That's something." After Eric left, Bram found himself looking at the girl differently. Less frightened with him. Was that true? He thought about it and realized it might be. She still would not speak to him, still flinched when he moved too quickly, but she had accepted food from him, had slept in his presence, had not tried to run when she clearly could have. "I need to call you something," Bram said, more to himself than to her. "You won't tell me your name, so I'll need to give you one. Just until we find your family." The girl watched him, unblinking. "What about Era?" Bram said. The word meant mercy in the old tongue, or sometimes snow. Both seemed fitting. "It's a good name, a strong name. Would that be all right?" The girl tilted her head slightly, considering. Then, to Bram's surprise, she gave the tiniest nod. So small he almost missed it, but it was there. Agreement, communication, something warm bloomed in Bram's chest. It was such a small thing, that nod. But it was the first real interaction they had had. The first bridge built across the gulf of fear between them. "Era it is, then," he said softly. "Welcome to my home, Era. You're safe here. I promise you that." The girl, Era, pulled the furs closer around herself and closed her eyes. But before she did, Bram could have sworn he saw the ghost of something that might someday become trust. Outside, the storm had broken at last. Pale sunlight filtered through gaps in the clouds. Inside, in the warm dimness of Bram's house, two broken souls had taken their first tentative steps toward healing each other. Eric returned the next morning with news and a bundle under his arm. He stamped the snow from his boots and set the bundle on the table before turning to Bram with a troubled expression. "I asked everyone in the settlement. No one knows her. No travelers reported missing, no families with lost children. Helvard sent word to the neighboring villages, but with the storm, it may be days before we hear back." Bram felt something complicated twist in his chest. Relief, perhaps, mixed with concern. If no one was looking for her, what did that mean? Had she been abandoned? Was her family dead? "There's more," Eric continued, glancing at Era, who watched them from her corner. Rolf was spreading talk at the communal hall, saying it's strange, a foreign child appearing out of nowhere, suggesting she might bring ill luck or worse. "Rolf is an idiot," Bram said flatly. "True, but others were listening. You know how people get when they're frightened. The storm was the worst in 20 years. Some are looking for someone to blame." Eric opened the bundle, revealing clothing, a simple wool dress, leggings, and a pair of small boots. Astrid sent these. They were her daughter's before she grew. She thought the girl might need proper clothing. Bram took the clothing, touched by the gesture. Astrid the healer had lost her own husband to a fishing accident years ago, raised her daughter alone. She understood loss, understood the need to care for those who had none. "Thank her for me," Bram said. After Eric left, Bram approached Era slowly, holding out the clothing. "These are for you. They'll fit better than what you were wearing, and they're warmer." Era looked at the clothing, then at him. For a long moment she did not move. Then slowly she reached out and took the bundle. Her fingers brushed his, and she did not flinch. It was progress, small but real. Bram turned his back to give her privacy. He heard rustling as she changed, and when he turned around again, she stood in the new clothing. The dress was slightly too large, but it would do. The boots fit well enough. She looked less like a ghost now, more solid, more real. "Better?" he asked. Era nodded. Then, to his surprise, she took a step toward him. Just one step, but it closed some of the distance between them. She stood there, looking up at him with those dark, serious eyes, and Bram felt his throat tighten. "Are you ready to go outside?" he asked. "Just to the doorway. Fresh air might do you good." Another small nod. Bram wrapped his own cloak around her shoulders. It dragged on the ground, far too large, but it was warm. He opened the door, and they stood together in the threshold, looking out at the transformed world. The storm had left everything buried under fresh snow, smooth and white, and impossibly beautiful. The sky was clear now, brilliant blue, and the sun made the snow sparkle like crushed diamonds. Era stared at it all with an expression Bram could not read. Was this familiar to her? Foreign? Did it remind her of something? Or was every moment now strange and new? She bent down and picked up a handful of snow, letting it sift through her fingers. Then she looked at Bram, and he saw a question in her eyes. "You want to go out?" he guessed. A nod, more emphatic this time. They walked together to the frozen stream behind his house. The world was quiet except for the crunch of their boots and the occasional call of a crow. Era stayed close to Bram's side, not quite touching him, but near enough that he could have reached out and taken her hand if he dared. At the stream, they found a place where the ice had formed smooth and clear. Era crouched down, peering through it at the dark water beneath. Bram watched her, feeling something unfamiliar stirring in him. Not quite happiness, he was not ready for that yet, but something adjacent to it. A lifting of the weight he had carried for so long. Etra stood and walked along the stream bank, looking at everything with intense focus. She stopped suddenly and bent down, digging in the snow. When she stood again, she held a smooth river stone in her palm, perfectly round and grey as storm clouds. She looked at it, then at Bram, then back at the stone. She closed her hand around it and held it against her chest, as if it were precious. "You can keep it," Bram said. "It's yours." From that moment on, Era carried the stone everywhere. She held it while she ate, clutched it while she slept, turned it over in her hands while she sat by the fire. It seemed to comfort her in some way. Bram did not fully understand, but he recognized the need. Everyone needed something to hold on to. Days passed, a week. Ira began to follow Bram around the house, watching as he cooked, mended his cloak, carved wood by the fire. She did not speak, but she was present in a way that made the house feel less empty. Bram found himself talking to her, narrating his actions, telling stories about the settlement, about his life before the grief consumed him. He did not know if she understood all of it, but she listened. He taught her small tasks, how to feed the fire without smothering it, how to fold blankets properly, how to sort dried beans for cooking. She learned quickly, her small hands surprisingly capable. Sometimes, when she concentrated on a task, Bram saw her tongue stick out slightly, just as his own daughter used to do. The memory brought pain, but not the crushing agony it once had. Now it was bittersweet, sad, but bearable. He could remember his daughter without feeling like he was drowning. Astrid came to visit, bringing herbs and checking on Era's frostbitten fingers and toes. The damage had not been as severe as feared. She would keep all her digits, though some might always be sensitive to cold. "She's looking better," Astrid observed, watching Ira arrange her stones in patterns on the floor. "And so are you, Bram." "I'm just keeping her fed and warm," Bram said gruffly. Astrid smiled, a knowing expression that made him uncomfortable. "If you say so. But I've known you since we were children. I haven't seen you look this alive in 3 years." After Astrid left, Bram thought about her words. Was it true? He looked at Ira, who was now building a small tower from kindling, her face serious with concentration. The stone sat beside her, never far from reach. Maybe it was true. Maybe caring for this lost child was waking something in him that had been dormant. The part that found purpose in protecting others, in being needed. The part that made life worth living. That night, Bram told Era a story. He sat by the fire and spoke of a brave shield maiden who fought alongside her brothers, who was fierce and strong and afraid of nothing. He made up details as he went, letting the story unfold naturally. Era listened intently, her eyes reflecting the firelight. When the story ended, Era did something she had never done before. She smiled. It was tiny, gone almost as soon as it appeared, but Bram saw it. His heart, that organ he thought had turned to stone, gave a painful lurch. "Did you like that story?" he asked softly. Era nodded. Then, moving very deliberately, she reached out and took Bram's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his larger ones and held on. She did not let go for a long time. Bram sat very still, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid this fragile moment would shatter. But it did not shatter, it held. And for the first time since his wife and daughter died, Bram felt something that might, someday, be hope. 2 weeks after finding Era, Bram woke before dawn and realized something had changed. He lay in the darkness, listening to the girl's soft breathing from her sleeping furs nearby, and tried to identify what felt different. Then it came to him. He had slept through the night. No nightmares, no waking in cold sweats, haunted by the faces of the dead. Just sleep, deep and dreamless, and now morning. He rose quietly and built up the fire. The routine was familiar now, comfortable. He had done these same tasks for years, but they felt different with Era here. They had purpose beyond mere survival. He was not just keeping himself alive anymore. He was caring for someone else. As the fire caught and warmth began to fill the room, Bram noticed something on the table. A cup he had left out the night before, usually left where it fell, had been placed neatly beside his water pitcher. Small thing, barely worth noticing. Except Era must have done it while he slept. She was learning his habits, anticipating needs, trying to help in her silent way. When Era woke, Bram had porridge ready. She ate without fear now, sitting at the table rather than huddled in the corner. The stone sat beside her bowl, always within reach. She still did not speak, but her eyes followed his movements with interest rather than terror. After breakfast, Bram pulled his woodworking tools from the shelf where they had gathered dust for 3 years. His hands remembered the feel of the knife handle, the gouge, the rasp. He selected a piece of birch, pale and straight-grained, and began to shape it. Shira watched with fascination. She moved closer, drawn by the curling shavings that fell like pale snow onto the floor. Bram worked slowly, letting her see each step. He was making a spoon, simple but functional, something small enough for her hands. "Watch the grain," he said, his voice rough from disuse in teaching. "You always cut with it, not against it. See how the wood wants to split this way? That's the grain talking to you." Ira's eyes were wide, absorbing everything. When Bram paused, she reached out and touched the half-formed spoon, running her fingers along its surface. Then she looked at him, a question clear in her expression. "Yes, it's for you," Bram said. "Every person should have their own spoon. This one will be yours." Something like wonder crossed Ira's face. She sat beside him and watched as he worked, occasionally handing him tools before he asked for them. She was learning, reading his movements, anticipating what he needed next. It reminded him of working with skilled apprentices in his youth, that wordless communication between master and student. When the spoon was finished, Bram handed it to Ira. She held it with both hands, turning it over, examining every detail. The handle was carved with simple patterns, waves and circles. Nothing fancy but pleasant to look at. The bowl of the spoon was smooth and even. Good work, if Bram said so himself. The first good work he had done in years. Ira looked up at him, and for the first time she spoke. One word, barely a whisper, but clear. "Thank you." Bram felt his breath catch. Her voice was small and soft, with an accent he could not place. But she had spoken. After 2 weeks of silence, she had found words. "You're welcome," he managed, his own voice rough with emotion. "It's good to hear your voice, Ira." She ducked her head, shy again, but she was smiling. That same tiny smile he had glimpsed before, but stronger now, more certain. That afternoon, Eric visited with news from the settlement. Word had come back from the neighboring villages. No one knew of any missing children matching Ira's description. No caravans reported losses. No family searching. It was as if she had appeared from nowhere, conjured by the storm itself. "What will you do?" Eric asked quietly, while Ira was outside gathering snow to melt for water. "What do you mean?" "She can't stay here forever, Uncle. People are talking. Some think it's improper, a man alone with a young girl. Others worry about where she came from, what it means that no one claims her." Bram felt anger rise in his chest. "Let them talk. She has nowhere else to go. I know that. And I support you. But Halvard asked me to tell you, there are families in the settlement who might take her. Families with mothers and other children. It might be better for her." The thought of giving Ira away, of sending her to live with strangers, made Bram's jaw clench. When had she become his to keep? When had he started thinking of her as something more than a temporary charge? "She stays with me," Bram said firmly. "Unless she wants to go, she stays." Eric studied his uncle's face and smiled. "Good, that's what I hoped you'd say. I'll tell Halvard you're keeping her. But you should know, Rolf is stirring up trouble. He's saying the girl is cursed, that the storm was unnatural, that she'll bring misfortune to Ravensfjord." "Rolf can jump in the frozen lake," Bram said. "He's got some people listening, though. You might need to address this at the next gathering." After Eric left, Bram found Ira outside, watching the village children play in the distance. A group of them were building snow forts and throwing snowballs, their laughter carrying on the cold air. Ira watched with obvious longing, but she did not approach. "Do you want to play with them?" Bram asked. Ira shook her head quickly, pressing closer to his side. "They're not so bad. Most of them are kind, but Ira would not go, and Bram understood. The world beyond his door was still too large, too frightening. She needed time. That evening, as darkness fell and they sat by the fire, Ira arranged her stones in patterns on the floor. She had collected several more during their walks. Different colors, different sizes, each one special to her in some way. She lined them up carefully, sorting them by some logic only she understood. Bram watched her, feeling that unfamiliar warmth in his chest again. When had his house stopped feeling empty? When had silence stopped meaning loneliness? He realized, with something like shock, that he had laughed that afternoon. Actually laughed, a genuine sound of amusement, when Ira had made a face at the taste of a particularly bitter herb in their stew. It had been so long since he laughed that the sound had startled him. "Era," he said softly. She looked up from her stones. "Are you happy here with me?" She considered the question seriously, as she seemed to consider everything. Then she nodded, definite and sure. "Good," Bram said, "because I'm happy you're here too." It was the most honest thing he had said in 3 years. And saying it out loud, admitting it, felt like breaking through ice into warmer water beneath. He was healing. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly, but healing nonetheless. Era returned to her stones, satisfied. After a while she began to hum. No melody, Bram recognized, just a quiet sound, tuneless but pleasant. The sound of a child feeling safe enough to make noise, to exist without fear. Bram picked up his carving knife and a fresh piece of wood. His hands moved almost without thought, guided by memory and muscle. He began to shape it, not certain yet what it would become. A toy, perhaps. Another gift for the girl who was slowly bringing him back to life. Outside, the winter night pressed close around the settlement. But inside Bram's house, the fire burned warm, and 2 people who had been alone found comfort in each other's presence. The broken man and the silent girl healing together, one small moment at a time. A month had passed since the storm, and spring's first hints were beginning to show. The days grew incrementally longer. The snow started to soften in the afternoon sun, and the settlement stirred with renewed energy. Era had changed in that time. She spoke now, not frequently, but enough. Short sentences, careful words, always with that strange accent that marked her as foreign. She smiled more often, laughed occasionally, a sound like bells that made Bram's chest tight with emotion he did not fully understand. She helped with daily tasks now, quick and capable. She could build a fire properly, prepare simple meals, mend small tears in fabric. She followed Bram like a shadow when he went into the forest to check traps or cut wood. She was learning to identify animal tracks in the snow, to read the weather by the sky's color, to understand the rhythms of this harsh northern life, but she still would not speak about where she came from or what had happened to her. When Bram asked gently about her past, she would go silent and withdrawn, clutching her stone until her knuckles turned white. So he stopped asking. The past could wait. One morning, Bram made a decision that surprised even himself. He took his best axe, the one with the perfectly balanced head and ash handle worn smooth by years of use, and walked to the market square, where traders set up their stalls. He found what he was looking for at old Gunner's stall. Rabbit furs, soft and thick, winter pelts at their finest. Gunner's eyes widened when he saw what Bram was willing to trade. "That's a fine axe, Bram, worth more than a few rabbit skins." "I know what it's worth," Bram said. "I want enough to make a blanket, a child's blanket." "Your finest pelts." Gunner studied him, then nodded slowly. "For that axe, you can have all the pelts you need. Good ones too." The trade was made. Bram carried the furs home, already planning how he would sew them together. His stitching was rough compared to what Hilda could have done, but it would hold. Era's eyes went wide when she saw the furs spread across the table. She touched them reverently, her small hands disappearing into the soft grey and white fur. "For you," Bram said. "A proper blanket? For me?" Her voice was small, disbelieving. "For you." Era looked at the furs, then at Bram, then back at the furs. Her eyes filled with tears. Before Bram could react, she threw her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his chest. She was crying, but not from sadness. Bram stood frozen for a moment, uncertain. Then slowly, carefully, he placed his hand on her head. Her hair was soft under his palm. He felt her grip tighten, holding on to him like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "It's all right," he murmured. "You're safe, little one." They stood like that for a long time, and something fundamental shifted between them. This was no longer temporary. This had become something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like family. That evening, the settlement gathered for the monthly thing, a meeting where disputes were settled and community matters discussed. Bram had avoided these for years, but Eric had warned him that Ira's presence would be brought up. If Bram did not attend, decisions might be made without his voice. He left Ira with Astrid. Walking to the gathering, Bram felt nervous in a way he had not experienced in decades. He cared about the outcome. That was new and unsettling. The thing was held in Halvard's longhouse. 40 or 50 people had gathered, more than usual. Bram found a place near the back. Ignoring the curious glances, Halvard called the meeting to order, addressing minor matters first. Then he cleared his throat, his expression grave. "Now we must discuss the child found in the storm." Rolf stood immediately, his face flushed. "She's foreign. Appears out of nowhere in an unnatural storm, and Bram keeps her hidden away. I say it's not right. She should be sent away or placed with a proper family. It's not proper. A man alone with a young girl." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, mixed with dissent. Bram felt his jaw clench. He stood, and the murmuring stopped. "I have something to say." Halvard nodded. "Speak, Bram." Bram's voice was rough but steady. "That girl was dying when I found her. Barefoot in a blizzard, barely breathing. I brought her inside and kept her alive. No one came for her. No one claimed her. For a month now, she's lived under my roof. And in that time, I've seen her go from terrified and silent to speaking and smiling. She's learning. She's healing. And so am I." He paused, surprised by his own honesty. "I was dead before she came, going through motions, waiting for the end. She gave me a reason to wake up. You want to talk about what's proper? I'll tell you, caring for those who have no one else. That's what we're supposed to do. But who is she?" Someone called out, "Where did she come from?" "Does it matter?" Bram shot back. "She's a child. She needed help." Halvard raised his hand for quiet. "Bram speaks well. But it would be better if we understood more about the girl's origins." "I've asked," Bram said. "She won't speak of it. Whatever happened to her was terrible enough that she's blocked it out. Would you force a traumatized child to relive her worst moments just to satisfy curiosity?" Astrid stood. "I've examined the girl. She shows signs of old injuries, poorly healed. Scars that suggest beatings, malnutrition. Whatever her past, it was not kind. Bram has given her safety and care. I see no reason to take that away." Eric stood as well. "I visit my uncle often. I've seen how they are together. The girl is happy. Bram is healing. Isn't that worth something?" The debate continued for another hour. In the end, Halvard called for a decision. The question: should Era remain with Bram or be placed elsewhere? The vote was closer than Bram would have liked, but it fell in his favor. Era could stay, with the understanding that Astrid would check on her regularly. Bram left the gathering feeling drained, but victorious. He walked quickly back to Astrid's house, where he found Era sitting by the fire, her stone clutched tight. She looked up when he entered, fear and hope warring in her expression. "You came back." "Of course I came back," Bram said. "I promised, didn't I?" "Are they making me leave?" Bram knelt before her, so their eyes were level. "No, you're staying with me, if you want to." "No one will make you leave." Era's face crumpled, and she threw herself into his arms again. This time Bram did not hesitate. He wrapped his arms around her and held her close. "You're mine now," he whispered into her hair. "And I'm yours. We're family, you and I. Do you understand?" Era nodded against his chest. "Family," she repeated. Then so quietly he almost missed it. "Papa." The word hit Bram like a physical blow. Papa. His daughter had called him that in another lifetime. He had thought he would never hear it again. But here it was, given freely by this girl who had lost everything and somehow chosen him. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "Yes, little one, Papa." They walked home together under the stars, the night cold but clear. Inside, Bram spent the evening sewing rabbit furs together by firelight while Era watched. His stitches were rough and uneven, but they held. By midnight, the blanket was complete. He wrapped it around Era's shoulders. She pulled it close, burying her face in the soft fur, and smiled up at him with pure, uncomplicated joy. That night, they both slept deeply, dreamlessly, wrapped in warmth and the knowledge that they had found something precious. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something new and equally valuable. A second chance at family, at love, at life. The next few weeks passed in a contentment Bram had forgotten was possible. Era blossomed like a flower finding sunlight. She spoke more each day, her vocabulary growing, though she still carried that foreign lilt in her words. She played with the village children now, tentatively at first, but with increasing confidence. A girl named Sigrid had taken particular interest in befriending her, and the two could often be found building snow structures or collecting interesting stones by the stream. But something nagged at Bram, a feeling he could not quite name. Sometimes, when he walked through the forest to check his traps, he had the sensation of being watched. Once he found fresh footprints in the snow near his house, too large to be from the village children, too deliberate to be random wandering. When he mentioned it to Eric, his nephew suggested it might be wolves or a bear emerging early from hibernation. But Bram knew animal tracks from human ones, and these were definitely human. He said nothing to Ira, no point in frightening her. But he started paying closer attention to their surroundings, and he moved his old sword from the storage chest to a place near the door where he could reach it quickly if needed. One evening, as the light faded and Bram prepared their supper, Ira came to him with something clutched in her small hand. Her expression was serious, almost frightened. "Papa," she said. The word came more easily to her now, natural as breathing. "I need to show you something." "What is it, little one?" Ira opened her hand. In her palm lay a pendant, silver and intricately worked, with markings Bram did not recognize. The craftsmanship was exceptional, far beyond anything made in Ravensfjord. "Where did you get this?" Bram asked, though he already suspected the answer. "It was in my cloak. The blue one. I found it today when I was looking at it. It was sewn into the lining hidden." Her voice trembled. "I remember it now. My mother put it there." Before she stopped, her face going pale. Bram set down the pot he was holding and knelt before her. "Before what, Ira?" "What do you remember?" The story came out in fragments, like pieces of a shattered pot being slowly reassembled. Ira's memories were returning, triggered by the pendant. Her family had not been simple folk. Her father had been someone important, though she did not fully understand what. They had lived far to the east, in a place with stone buildings and many people. Her mother had been kind and beautiful, always singing. Then men came. Bad men, Ira called them, her voice dropping to a whisper. They attacked in the night. There was fire and screaming. Her mother had hidden her, pressed the pendant into the lining of her cloak, told her to run and never look back. Ira remembered running, remembered being caught, remembered hands grabbing her. The men who took her spoke of selling her, of ransom, of what wealthy families would pay for a child of good blood. She had been passed from hand to hand for weeks, maybe months. Time had blurred. She remembered a cart, a ship, cold and hunger and cruel voices. She remembered escaping during a snowstorm when her captors were drunk and careless. She had run into the forest, kept running until she could run no more, and then the cold and darkness had taken her until Bram found her. By the time she finished speaking, Ira was shaking. Bram pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried, great heaving sobs that shook her small frame. All the terror and grief she had been holding inside came pouring out, and Bram held her through it all, murmuring words of comfort, promising she was safe now, that no one would hurt her again. When the crying finally subsided, Bram examined the pendant more carefully. The markings were definitely foreign, possibly from one of the eastern kingdoms. If Ira's family had been important, nobility or wealthy merchants, this pendant might be worth a fortune. More importantly, it might help identify who she was, where she came from, but it also meant something else. If men had taken her for ransom, if she had escaped, they might still be looking for her. Those footprints in the snow, that feeling of being watched, suddenly it all made terrible sense. "Ira," Bram said carefully, "the men who took you, do you remember what they looked like?" She nodded, sniffling. "One had a scar, a big one across his face. Another had yellow hair, very long. The third was big, bigger than you, and he had marks on his arms. Pictures drawn in his skin, tattoos," Bram said. His gut twisted. These were not random bandits. They sounded organized, professional. Slavers, perhaps, or mercenaries. The kind of men who did not give up easily when valuable property escaped. That night, after Ira had fallen asleep under her rabbit fur blanket, Bram sat by the fire and thought hard about what to do. He could take Era and run, try to reach another settlement or find her family if they still lived. But travel was dangerous, especially with a child, and he had no guarantee of safety elsewhere. He could appeal to Halvard for help, organize the settlement's defense. But that would put everyone at risk, and some, like Rolf, would likely argue for simply giving Era up to avoid trouble, or he could prepare to defend his home, alone if necessary. The next morning, Bram went to Eric. He told his nephew everything, the pendant, Era's recovered memories, his suspicions about being watched. Eric's face grew grave as he listened. "You should tell Halvard," Eric said. "This is bigger than just you and the girl. And risk the settlement deciding she's too much trouble? Risk them turning her over to men who would hurt her? Uncle, you can't fight off a group of armed men alone. You're one person. I was a warrior for 30 years, Eric. I haven't forgotten how. That was years ago." "You're not young anymore," Bram smiled grimly. "Neither were most of the men I fought beside. Age brings wisdom, nephew, and I'm more motivated now than I ever was in battle. Back then I fought for honor and plunder. Now I fight for something that actually matters." Eric studied his uncle's face and saw something there he had not seen in years: determination, purpose, the look of a man who had found his line in the sand and would not cross it. "Then I'll help you," Eric said. "You're not doing this alone." Over the next few days, Bram prepared. He retrieved his old sword and spent hours cleaning, oiling, and sharpening it. The weight felt strange in his hands at first, but muscle memory returned. He set up simple traps around his property. Nothing deadly, but things that would alert him to intruders. He moved certain supplies closer to hand, planned escape routes, identified defensive positions. Era watched all this with wide, frightened eyes. She understood what it meant, even if Bram tried to downplay it. Someone might be coming for her. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Ira climbed into Bram's lap, something she had started doing recently, seeking comfort in closeness. She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in a small voice. "Maybe I should go away." "So you'll be safe." Bram's arms tightened around her. "Don't even think that. You're my daughter now. A father protects his children. That's what we do. But what if they hurt you? What if... Era, listen to me." Bram tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. "For 3 years I was dead inside, just going through motions, waiting for the end. Then I found you and you gave me back my life. You gave me a reason to wake up, to laugh, to hope. Whatever comes, whatever I have to face, it's worth it. You're worth it. Do you understand?" Era's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "I love you, Papa." The words hit Bram in the chest. She had never said them before, not directly. He felt his own eyes burn. "I love you too, little one. More than you know." 3 days later, just before dawn, Bram woke to a sound outside. Not loud, but distinct. The soft crunch of boots in snow. Multiple sets of boots. He was up and moving before full consciousness returned, old instincts taking over. He grabbed his sword, moved to the door, and peered through a crack in the wood. 3 figures approached through the pre-dawn gloom. 3 men, moving with purpose toward his home. One was large, bulky even in the dim light. Another had long hair that caught what little moonlight remained. The third was harder to see, but something about his silhouette suggested a facial scar. The men from Era's memories. They had found her. Bram's heart pounded, but his hands were steady. He moved back to where Ira slept, shook her gently awake. Her eyes opened, confused, then frightened when she saw his expression. "They're here," he whispered. "The men. I need you to hide. Remember that space under the floor we talked about? The root cellar?" Era nodded, suddenly very awake. Bram had shown her the hiding place days ago, had made her practice getting in and out quickly. Now they would see if that preparation was enough. He lifted the boards, helped Era down into the small space beneath. It was cramped and dark, but it would keep her hidden. He handed her the carved wooden horse, the one he had made for his own daughter years ago, the one he had finally given to Ira last week. "Stay quiet no matter what you hear," Bram said. "Don't come out until I tell you it's safe, or until morning light if—" He stopped, unable to finish that sentence. "Just stay hidden. And Ira, I love you. "I love you too, Papa," she whispered. Bram lowered the boards back into place, scattered rushes and a rug over them to hide the seams. He stood, sword in hand, and faced the door. Outside, the footsteps had stopped. The men were discussing something in low voices. Then a fist hammered on the wood. "Open up, we know you have the girl. Send her out, and there'll be no trouble." Bram took a breath, steadied himself, and prepared to do what he had always done best. Protect those who could not protect themselves. Even if it cost him everything, Bram did not open the door. Instead, he called through the wood, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "There's no girl here. You have the wrong house." A laugh from outside, harsh and mocking. "Don't play games with us, old man. We've been watching. We know she's in there. The foreign brat who ran from us. She's valuable property, and we're taking her back." "She's not property," Bram said, his grip tightening on his sword. "She's a child. And she's under my protection." "Your protection?" Another laugh. "You're one man. We're three. Be smart about this. Hand her over, and we'll pay you for your trouble." "A handful of silver. More than a girl like that is worth to you. She's worth more to me than all the silver in the world." There was a pause. Then the voice hardened. "Last chance, old man. Send out the girl or we come in and take her. And when we do, you'll regret making this difficult." Bram's mind raced, calculating. 3 men, all younger than him, all likely experienced fighters given their profession. His house had only one entrance, which was both advantage and disadvantage. They could not surround him easily, but he also had no escape route if things went badly. The walls were thick wood, hard to break through quickly, but not impossible. He had minutes at best to prepare. "Think about it," he called back. "Take your time." "I'm not going anywhere." He heard them conferring in low voices. Good. Every moment they wasted talking was a moment he could use to prepare. He moved quickly and quietly, his old training taking over. He overturned the heavy table, creating a barrier. He positioned the storage chest to block direct line of sight to the sleeping area. He grabbed his hunting bow from the wall and checked his arrows. 6 good ones, iron-tipped. His hands worked automatically, while his mind stayed cold and clear. This was familiar territory in a way. Not exactly battle, but close enough. The fear was there, the uncertainty, but underneath it was something else. A calm center, a place he used to live in during his warrior years. The place where you accepted that death was possible and stopped worrying about it, because worry got you killed faster than anything else. The difference was what he was fighting for. Before, it had been abstract things, honor, gold, loyalty to a jarl he barely knew. Now it was Era, a small girl hiding beneath the floor, clutching a wooden horse, trusting him to keep her safe. That made all the difference. Outside, the voices stopped. Bram heard footsteps moving, spreading out. They were positioning themselves. His window of preparation was closing. He tested the door's bar, made sure it was secure. It would not hold long against a determined assault, but it would buy time. He nocked an arrow, kept the bow ready but not drawn. Maintaining a draw would tire his arms too quickly. He positioned himself at an angle where he could see the door and still have the table for cover. Then he waited. The crash, when it came, was explosive. Something heavy, a log perhaps, slammed into the door. The bar held, but the wood splintered. Another crash and another. The door was strong, but it would not survive many more hits. "Eric," Bram muttered under his breath. "Where are you, boy?" He had sent word to his nephew the night before, a message carried by one of the village children. If Eric received it, if he believed the danger was real, he might bring help. But dawn was still just breaking. The settlement would barely be stirring. Even if help was coming, Bram might have to hold out for a while. The door shattered on the 5th impact, the bar breaking, wood fragments flying inward. A man pushed through immediately, the big one Bram saw, massive and confident. He held an axe, his arms covered in the tattoos Era had described. Bram released his arrow. It took the big man in the shoulder, spinning him sideways with a cry of pain. Not a killing shot, but enough to take him out of the immediate fight. The man crashed into the doorframe, blocking the entrance for a moment. "He's armed," someone shouted. "Careful!" Bram already had another arrow nocked. He aimed at the doorway, waiting. A face appeared, the one with the scar, and Bram fired. The man jerked back just in time, the arrow grazing his cheek and drawing blood. 2 arrows gone, 1 man wounded, no kills yet. Bram's odds had barely improved. The man with the scar, clearly the leader, called out, "You're making this worse for yourself, old man. That girl belongs to us. We have a buyer waiting. Important people who want her back. You can't win this." "I don't need to win," Bram called back. "I just need to keep you out until help arrives." "Help?" The scarred man laughed. "You think your sheep-herding neighbors will fight us? They'll hand her over the moment we ask nicely. They're not warriors, and neither are you. Not anymore." The words stung because there was truth in them. Bram was older, slower, his reflexes dulled by years of inactivity. These men were in their prime, professional fighters who did this for a living. In a straight fight, he would lose, but Bram had something they did not. He had a reason to fight that went beyond gold. And he had decades of experience that taught him one crucial lesson. You did not need to be the strongest or fastest to win. You just needed to be smart and willing to do whatever it took. "Come and find out what kind of warrior I am," Bram said. He saw movement at the edge of the broken door. Someone trying to peek around, assess the situation. Bram fired, not to hit but to keep them back. The arrow punched into the doorframe inches from the movement, and whoever it was jerked away. 3 arrows left. This was not sustainable. He could keep them at bay for a while, but eventually they would find a way in. The walls were thick, but the roof had weak points. The window was small, but not impossible to breach. And once they got past his arrows, it would come down to close combat. 3 against 1. Poor odds. Beneath the floor, Era would be terrified. She would hear everything, the crashes, the shouts, the sounds of violence. Bram hated that she had to experience this, but there was no other choice. He just had to keep her hidden and pray he could survive long enough for help to arrive, if help was coming at all. The big man with the shoulder wound had pulled back from the doorway, but Bram could hear him cursing, still mobile. The shoulder wound was not serious enough to stop him permanently. Soon all 3 would coordinate an assault, and Bram's defenses would crumble. He needed a new strategy. Moving quickly, Bram grabbed a clay pot from the shelf, one filled with cooking oil. He stuffed a rag into the top, lit it from the fire. A crude fire pot, but it would serve. When the scarred man showed himself again at the door, Bram hurled it. The pot shattered against the doorframe, oil splashing, flames spreading. The man jumped back with a shout. Fire licked up the doorframe and across the threshold, creating a temporary barrier. It would not last long. The snow would dampen it, and there was not enough fuel to sustain it, but it bought precious time. "You're insane," the scarred man shouted. "Maybe," Bram called back, "but I'm insane with a bow and fire. How badly do you want this girl?" He could hear them conferring again, their voices urgent. The fire changed things. If they forced their way through now, they would risk serious burns. And while they might be willing to risk death for enough money, burns were different. Painful, crippling, potentially fatal in slow, agonizing ways. But Bram knew it was a delaying tactic only. The fire would die, and when it did, they would come with renewed determination. Minutes passed. The fire at the doorway dwindled to smoking embers. The sun was rising now, pale light filtering through gaps in the walls. Bram's arms ached from holding the bow ready. His heart hammered against his ribs. He was not as young as he used to be, and the adrenaline was taking its toll. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. Movement on the roof. They were climbing up, looking for another way in. Of course they were. They were professionals, not idiots. While he watched the door, they would breach through the roof. Bram moved to the center of the room, trying to watch both the door and the ceiling. This was it. The final moments before everything came apart. He had 2 arrows left and 3 enemies still functional. His sword was ready, but once it came to blade work, his age would show. He thought of Era beneath the floor. Thought of her smile, her laugh, the way she called him Papa. Thought of how she had brought him back to life when he had been ready to let go. She deserved better than this. Deserved a long life, safety, happiness. If he died here today, so be it. But he would die protecting her. That was enough. The roof boards creaked. A blade appeared, prying between planks, widening a gap. Soon they would drop through, and Bram would face them from two directions at once. He drew his arrow, aimed at the growing hole in the roof, and prepared himself for the end. Then he heard something beautiful, something that changed everything. A horn. The sound of the settlement's warning horn, loud and clear in the morning air. And with it voices, many voices. People running, shouting, weapons clanging. Help had arrived. The movement on the roof stopped. Bram heard cursing, then scrambling. Through the broken door, he saw figures appearing. Eric at the front, Halvard behind him, and at least a dozen others from the settlement, all armed with whatever they could find. Axes, spears, hunting bows, farming tools turned to weapons. The three mercenaries were suddenly surrounded. Bram saw them realize their situation, saw calculation flash across the scarred man's face. They were outnumbered now badly. Whatever they were being paid, it was not worth dying for. Fall back, the scarred man shouted. We're done here. They ran, crashing through the trees, heading for wherever they had left their horses. Some of the younger men from the settlement started to pursue, but Halvard called them back. Let them go. Our concern is here. Eric rushed through the broken doorway, his face pale with fear and relief. Uncle, are you hurt? Bram lowered his bow, his hands suddenly shaking as the adrenaline drained away.
I'm fine.
But he dropped to his knees and pulled up the floorboards. Ira sat in the darkness beneath, her eyes huge, her face streaked with tears. She clutched the wooden horse so tightly her knuckles were white. When she saw Bram, she let out a sob and reached up for him. Bram pulled her out of the hiding place and into his arms. She wrapped herself around him like she would never let go, crying into his shoulder. He held her tight, one hand cradling her head, the other supporting her small body. It's over, he murmured. You're safe. They're gone. It's over. Around them, the settlement folk filled the small house, checking for danger, assessing damage, talking urgently. But Bram barely heard them. His whole world had narrowed to the small girl in his arms, alive and safe. Everything else could wait. The men did not run far. Eric discovered this an hour later when he went to track them, following the obvious trail through the snow. He returned quickly, his face grim, and pulled Bram aside while Astrid tended to Ira inside. They stopped just beyond the tree line, Eric said quietly. Made camp. They're not leaving. Bram felt his jaw tighten. How many others saw you? Just me. I was careful. Good, don't tell the others yet. No point in causing panic. But Halvard had followed them outside and heard everything. The old man's expression was troubled. They're waiting. Planning something. They're mercenaries, Bram said. They won't give up as long as they think they can still collect their payment. The girl is worth too much to them. Then we need to act, Halvard said. We can't simply wait for them to attack again. Next time they might target other homes, take hostages. We have women and children to protect. I know. Bram looked back at his damaged house, where Ira sat wrapped in her rabbit fur blanket, still shaking from the ordeal. This is my fight. I won't let it endanger the whole settlement. It stopped being just your fight when they came here, Halvard said firmly. This is about all of us now. They threatened our people, damaged our property. That cannot stand, Eric nodded. Halvard's right, Uncle. We stand together. Bram felt something warm and painful in his chest. For years, he had isolated himself, pushed people away, convinced himself he was alone. But now, when it mattered most, his community stood with him. They were willing to fight for him, for Era, for the principle that a child should not be stolen by cruel men. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. Both of you. They gathered the able-bodied men in Halvard's longhouse, 15 in total, ranging from young Eric to men in their 50s like Bram. Most were farmers or craftsmen with limited fighting experience, but they knew how to handle weapons. They had hunted, defended against wolves and bears, dealt with the occasional bandit. They were not helpless. Bram found himself taking the lead in planning, his old tactical mind awakening. He drew a rough map in the dirt floor, marking the mercenaries' position, the approaches, the terrain. They're professional fighters, he said. Better trained than us, better equipped. But we have numbers and we know this land. Those are our advantages. What do you suggest? Halvard asked. We don't attack their camp directly. That plays to their strengths. Instead, we draw them out. Make them come to us. On ground we choose where we can control the engagement. How? Someone asked. Bram looked at the faces around him. Farmers and fishermen, fathers and sons, men who had lived peaceful lives until this morning. He hated that he was leading them into danger. But the alternative was worse. They want Era, he said. So we give them what they want. Or make them think we're giving them what they want. He outlined his plan. It was risky, dependent on timing and luck, but it was better than waiting for another attack. Some objected, calling it too dangerous. Others supported it immediately. In the end, Halvard made the decision. We do it, the old man said. Better to act than to cower and wait. They prepared through the morning. Men gathered weapons, checked their readiness. Bram retrieved his sword, the blade sharp and ready. He tested its weight, its balance. It still felt right in his hand, despite the years. Eric approached him as they prepared to move out. Are you sure about this, uncle? You're putting yourself at the most risk, I'm sure, Bram said. I've lived long enough. But Era, she has her whole life ahead of her. Whatever it takes to keep her safe, I'll do it. You're not planning to come back, are you? Eric's voice was quiet, understanding. Bram did not answer directly. If something happens to me, you'll look after her. Make sure she's cared for? Nothing's going to happen to you. Eric, promise me. The young man's eyes were wet. I promise. But you're going to be fine. You're too stubborn to die? Bram managed to smile. Let's hope you're right. Before they left, Bram went to see Era one last time. She was with Astrid, still wrapped in her blanket, the wooden horse in her lap. When she saw Bram, she ran to him. Don't go, she pleaded. Stay here. Stay safe. Bram knelt and held her face in his hands. I have to go, little one. To make sure those men can never hurt you again. To make sure you're safe. But what if, her voice broke, listen to me. Whatever happens, you remember this. You are loved. You are precious. You are wanted. Never doubt that. And you're strong, Era. Stronger than you know. If I don't come back... No! She threw her arms around his neck. Don't say that! Bram held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the feel of her small body in his arms. This child who had saved him just as surely as he had saved her. This girl who had given him back his purpose, his heart, his life. I love you, Papa, she whispered. I love you too, my daughter. Always. He gently pulled away, stood and walked toward the door. He did not look back. If he looked back, he might not be able to leave. Outside, the men were ready. 15 warriors, some young, some old, none of them truly trained for battle. But all of them willing to fight for what was right. Bram took his place at the front. He raised his sword, and the morning sun caught the blade, making it gleam. Let's end this, he said. The plan was simple. Bram would approach the mercenaries' camp alone, appearing to negotiate. While they focused on him, the others would move into position around the clearing. When Bram gave the signal, dropping to one knee, they would reveal themselves, surrounding the mercenaries. Faced with overwhelming numbers, the men would surrender or flee. It relied on too many variables, but it was what they had. Bram walked through the forest alone, following the tracks. His sword hung at his side, his shield on his arm. He moved openly, making no attempt at stealth. He wanted them to see him coming. He found their camp in a small clearing. A fire burned in the center, 3 bedrolls nearby. The big man with the shoulder wound sat close to the fire, his arm bound. The one with long yellow hair was sharpening a blade. The scarred leader stood when Bram appeared, his hand moving to his weapon. The old warrior returns, the scarred man said. Come to beg? Come to talk, Bram said calmly. Man to man, nothing to talk about. We want the girl. You hand her over, we leave. Can't do that. She's my daughter now, the scarred man laughed. Your daughter? You found her weeks ago. Don't pretend this is about family. What's she to you? Bram asked. Just gold, right? Good gold. Her uncle's paying well for her return. Something about an inheritance. Rich folk problems. Her uncle, Bram said slowly. The one who killed her parents? The scarred man's expression flickered just for a moment, but enough. Confirmation. We don't ask questions about family business. We get paid to deliver the girl. So you'd deliver a child to the man who murdered her mother and father? To a man who wants her dead so he can steal her inheritance? Not our concern, the man repeated, but he looked uncomfortable. It should be, Bram said. You're helping a murderer finish what he started. That girl, Era, she's 7 years old. She's been through more horror than any child should face. Big words from a dead man. You came here alone. You could try to kill me, Bram said. His voice was steady. But you should know, I'm not alone. He dropped to one knee. The forest erupted with movement. Men stepped from behind trees, forming a loose circle around the clearing. 15 men, all armed, all facing inward. The mercenaries spun, weapons coming up, suddenly surrounded. New terms, Bram said, standing. You leave now, empty-handed, and live. Or you fight and die. Your choice. The scarred man's face twisted with rage. His eyes darted around the circle, counting opponents. You don't have the stomach for this. You're farmers. True, Bram said. But we're protecting our own. That makes us dangerous. The tension stretched. The mercenaries were skilled fighters, but they were outnumbered 5-1. The scarred man's hand tightened on his weapon. Then the yellow-haired man spoke. I'm not dying for this. The girl's not worth it. He lowered his weapon. The big man with the wounded shoulder nodded. Agreed. The scarred man's face purpled. Cowards! Then take them alone, the yellow-haired man said. I'm done. For a long moment the scarred man stood rigid, pride warring with survival. Then he spat into the snow and lowered his weapon. This isn't over, he said to Bram. The uncle will send others. I can try to stop them, Bram said. And if others come, we'll be ready. The mercenaries gathered their belongings quickly. The circle of settlement men parted to let them through, keeping weapons trained until they disappeared into the forest. When the sounds faded, someone whooped. Others joined in, relief and triumph mixing. They had won without bloodshed. Bram felt no triumph, only exhaustion. He had gambled with lives and won. But it could have gone differently. Eric approached, grinning. We did it. For now, Bram said. But that man was right. The uncle might send others. Halvard joined them, serious. Then we prepare. We send word to the Jarl. That girl is under our protection now. The men murmured agreement. What had started as one man protecting a child had become something larger. The settlement had claimed Era as one of their own. Bram looked back toward Ravensfjord, where Era waited. His daughter, his reason for fighting, for living, for hoping, he had kept her safe. For today, that was enough. 2 weeks passed and spring arrived in earnest. The snow melted in rushing streams, revealing dark earth beneath. Green shoots pushed through the ground, stubborn and hopeful. Birds returned from their southern journeys, filling the air with song. The world was waking up, and so was Ravensfjord. Bram's house had been repaired, the door replaced, the roof patched. But more than the physical structure had been mended. Something fundamental had shifted in both the house and the man who lived in it. Era no longer feared every shadow or flinched at sudden sounds. She played with the other children now, her laughter ringing through the settlement. Sigrid had become her constant companion, the two girls inseparable. Watching them, Bram felt a contentment he had thought lost forever. The settlement had changed too. Word of what happened had spread to neighboring villages. A messenger arrived from the Jarl's hall, summoning Halvard and Bram to give account. They went together, unsure what to expect. The Jarl was a hard man, weathered by years of leadership. He listened to their story in silence, his expression unreadable. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You took in a foreign child, he said finally. Fought off mercenaries? Most men would have turned the girl away to avoid trouble. Most men aren't Bram, Halvard said quietly. The Jarl studied Bram. I knew you years ago. You fought in the southern campaign. Bram the Steady, they called you. I heard you had lost your family, withdrawn from the world. I had, Bram said. But things change. Indeed. The Jarl walked to the window. The girl's uncle, I've made inquiries. Powerful man in the Eastern Territories. He's been searching for his niece, claiming she was kidnapped. Bram's jaw tightened. He arranged the kidnapping himself, so your story suggests. And I believe you, the Jarl turned back. I've sent word to the King's court. There will be an investigation. Until then, the girl remains under my protection. Which means she remains with you, Relief washed through Bram. "She's my daughter now." "Then it's settled," the Jarl smiled. "You did well, Bram. It takes courage to stand against men like those mercenaries." They returned to Ravensfjord with the news. A celebration was held that night, the whole settlement gathering for a feast. There was music and dancing, stories told and retold. Children ran between the adults, playing in the firelight. Ira stayed close to Bram, but she was smiling, relaxed, part of the community. Astrid approached with her daughter. "Bram," she said warmly, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me." "For what?" "For reminding us what matters. For 3 years we watched you suffer. Then this child appeared, and you came back to life. You reminded us that family isn't just blood. It's choice. It's love." Bram felt his throat tighten. "She saved me as much as I saved her." "I know," Astrid said. "That's what makes it beautiful." Later, as the celebration wound down, Bram and Ira walked back to their house under a sky full of stars. Ira held his hand, chattering about the evening, about what Sigrid had said, about the music and food. Inside, the house was warm and welcoming. The fire burned steadily. Ira's belongings were scattered about. Her stones on a shelf, her rabbit fur blanket folded on her furs, the wooden horse placed carefully beside her pillow. But there was something new. While they had been at the celebration, Bram had been working on a project in secret. Now it was finished, waiting on the table. "What's that?" Ira asked, pointing. "Come see." It was a carved wooden horse, but not the old one. This was new, made specifically for Ira, larger than the first, more detailed, better crafted. The mane flowed in realistic waves, the muscles were defined, the legs positioned mid-gallop. He had spent hours on it, getting every detail right. It was perhaps the finest thing he had ever made. "For me," Ira whispered, touching it reverently. "For you. The other one connects us to the past. But this one, this is just yours. New beginnings." Erdra picked up the horse, cradling it carefully. Then she looked up at Bram with shining eyes. "It's beautiful. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Bram said softly. "You brought me back to life, little one. You gave me hope. You saved me," Ira said. "We saved each other." She set down the horse and hugged him tightly. Bram wrapped his arms around her, this small person who had become his entire world. "Papa," Ira said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Yes?" "Tell me a story? About the brave warrior who found a lost girl in the snow?" Bram smiled. "I know that story well. It's my favorite." He settled into his chair, and Ira climbed into his lap, the new wooden horse held carefully in her hands. As he began to speak, telling the tale of how they found each other, he realized this was the story he would tell for the rest of his life. Not the battles he fought in his youth, not the glory he once pursued. This story, the one about a broken man and a lost child who healed each other. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who need saving most. Sometimes family is built not from blood, but from choice, from showing up, from love freely given. Sometimes in the darkest winter you find the light that guides you home, and sometimes that light comes in the form of a small girl with dark eyes and a brave heart, who teaches you that it's never too late to start again, never too late to love, never too late to live. Bram finished his story as Ira's breathing deepened into sleep. He carried her to her furs, tucked the rabbit blanket around her, and placed the new wooden horse beside her pillow where she could see it when she woke. Then he sat by the fire and looked around his home. It was no longer empty. It was no longer silent. It was filled with life and love, and the sweet sound of a child's breathing. He thought of Hilda and his first daughter, and for the first time in years, the memory brought only warmth. They would approve of this, he knew. They would be happy that he had found his way back to living. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, spring continued its patient work of renewal, and inside, a father watched over his sleeping daughter, grateful beyond words for the storm that brought them together, for the chance to save and be saved, for the gift of a second beginning. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the battles you won or the glory you achieved, but the love you gave and received. The lives you touched, the family you built. Bram the Steady had become Bram the Father. And that was the greatest victory of all.